Darth Vader is one of the most powerful Sith Lords in the modern era of Star Wars, facing down entire battalions of rebels and Jedi Knights alike without wavering at all. Throughout the course of his life, there has only been very little to scare the fearsome Sith Lord, and for most of his career, he has been unafraid of any threats that have come to face him. There is one occasion, however, when Darth Vader ran from a fight. One occasion where he was terrified beyond anything that had scared him before, to the point where he actively fled, running for his life, driven by innate terror. So what was terrifying enough to cause the fearsome Darth Vader, Lord of the Sith, Chosen One, and heir to the Empire, to run away? Well, today, students of the Force, we will dive into that very question and explore what exactly made Vader run. The story comes from the Legends comic series Star Wars Vector, which opens by following two ancient Jedi Knights by the name of Celeste Morne and Zane Carrick in the year 3963 BBY, almost 4,000 years before the fall of the Jedi Order in Order 66. These two Jedi Knights served as agents of the Jedi Covenant, a clandestine division of Jedi Knights that have been erased from the Jedi archives and have long since been forgotten to time. In the comic line, they are tasked with retrieving an ancient Sith artifact known as the Talisman, which was recently unearthed and was currently in the possession of the Mandalorian Punisher. The ancient Sith relic had the idea to infect non-Force sensitive individuals and corrupt their very minds, stripping their psyches down and effectively driving them insane. The rapid mental deterioration effectively turns them into zombies of sorts, lifeless husks who are prone to influence and seek only to consume. And this infection is known as the Rakghoul Plague. During their fight, the plague broke out on Jebel, and while the virus itself targeted non-Force sensitives, they could be controlled by a Force sensitive who fell under the control of the Talisman itself, which possessed the spirit of the original Sith Lord who had forged the Talisman, Martynas. A Force sensitive individual who harnessed the Talisman would effectively have access to their own army of mindless Rakghoul creatures to command at their own discretion, along with the ability to spread the infection across the entire galaxy if they desired to do so. But since this artifact was crafted by a Dark Lord of the Sith, it fed on the energy of the dark side, and the spirit of Martynas would corrupt light side wielders as well. During the conflict, the Jedi Celeste Morne fell under the Talisman's control and slowly began to succumb to the infection. And in one final act of noble self-sacrifice, she allowed Karnak to imprison her in a Sith sarcophagus known as Drepa's Obelete. She did this in order to save the galaxy from herself as well as the spirit of Martynas and his plague, who was unable to communicate with Morne and tempt her towards the dark side as she was within the sarcophagus. And Carrick promised that he would one day send someone to return for her when he was convinced that they could remove her safely, without the plague getting loose. And this Obelete placed her in a stasis for the next several thousand years. This, though, would be the individual that Darth Vader feared. For the next 1,000 years, Celeste Morne remained frozen in time until the year 19 BBY, forgotten by the Jedi of her generation and left to die, and slowly abandoned by the crawl of history. Celeste Morne still survived. When she was ultimately rediscovered, however, it was by none other than Darth Vader, newly arisen executioner of the burgeoning Imperial Empire under Sidious. Upon awakening the Jedi, it was discovered that she had fallen victim to the possession of Martynas, who was now in full control of her body, the spirit of the very same Sith Lord who had created the Talisman, and the two beings effectively coexisted in the same body. This meant that for a time, Martynas and Celeste Morne were simultaneously a Jedi and a Sith at the same time, as the spirit and aggression of an ancient Sith Lord corrupted the body of a talented ancient Jedi Knight. And when Celeste Morne awakened, she was faced with the mask of none other than Darth Vader. She came to learn that in this era, the Sith ruled the galaxy under the dominion of a Sith Lord known as Sidious, which enraged Celeste Morne. Here, with the power of the Talisman and the spirit of Morne within herself, she dueled Darth Vader, deciding to destroy the Sith of this era. After a lengthy duel following the revival, Vader overpowered her in lightsaber combat, sensing her innate incredible power and offering her a chance to become his own Sith apprentice. This was in fact one of the hardest fights of Darth Vader's life, but at the same time, he sensed the dark side ever prevalent in this young Jedi. An ancient Jedi that with the combined might of Vader and Celeste Morne, he believed could overthrow the Emperor. Not only this, but Vader was also fascinated with the artifact that the ancient Jedi held. The spirit of Mur, however, wanted Celeste Morne to sacrifice her life so that the talisman could be controlled by Vader, who would be much more willing to spread his plague and set him free once again. And in a final attempt to escape, Celeste Morne unleashed the Rakghoul plague throughout Vader's ship. Throughout the duel, the stormtroopers around Vader were rapidly succumbing to the Rakghoul plague, and with each passing minute, Morne was infecting more and more of his battalion and turning them against Vader, crash landing the ship on the desolate moon devoid of all life. As a very last resort to stop the Rakghoul plague, Darth Vader, for nearly the first time in his career, was on the back pedal, losing a fight against a Jedi. This battalion, in tandem with ancient Sith magic that Vader had not seen before, led to Vader realizing that he was in over his head, and he truly did not understand the full extent of exactly what he was dealing with. And again, for the first time, Vader believed that he may lose this encounter. Vader's stormtroopers were rapidly turning against him, and he was unable to evaluate the full extent of Martynas Mur's power, and for perhaps the only time in his career, Vader was terrified. We know that Vader has been slightly nervous before against the likes of Obi-Wan Kenobi, but never outright terrified. Even throughout the Clone Wars, Anakin Skywalker was noted for his lack of fear and willingness to engage in any combat scenario, no matter how daunting the mission was. So for Lord Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, to be terrified was truly a feat. And it was in this moment where Darth Vader felt an emotion that he so rarely had, that of fear, that he decided to ultimately flee the Rakghoul plague, as well as Celeste Morne and the spirit of Martynas Mur. Taking one of the last escape shuttles, he returned to the Emperor in the Imperial Empire, and would have nothing more to do with Celeste Morne or the Talisman for almost 20 years. Celeste Morne, however, would remain in exile on the moon with the spirit of Martynas Mur, with his temptations unable to reach the larger galaxy. Out of curiosity though, Darth Vader sent a group of elite stormtroopers to the moon to investigate if Celeste Morne was still alive, sending the squad to her last known location. Unfortunately for these troopers, however, they found her alive and well, but these stormtroopers were unable to fare any better than the previous legion that had tried to subdue her all those years ago, and all died and succumbed to the plague. In utter shock, Vader leaked the information of the Martynas Mur talisman and Celeste Morne to the Rebel Alliance, hoping that they too would send agents to investigate this forgotten moon. And later, various members of the Rebel Alliance returned to this moon in order to investigate what had happened, including the Skywalker twins Luke and Leia. By this point, Celeste Morne's own sanity had been all but corroded by Mur and his incessant voice, which had tormented her for nearly 20 years. Eventually though, Celeste Morne would manage to escape the planet after a brief confrontation with Luke and Leia, wherein Leia was able to dispel the influence of Martynas Mur. Eventually, Martynas Mur and Celeste Morne would be defeated by Cade Skywalker, an ancestor of Lord Vader himself. But this still marks the only known individual in Star Wars that Darth Vader ever ran from out of his complete and utter fear for her. The combined might of an ancient Sith Lord, one of the first ever Sith Lords, and a powerful ancient Jedi, was enough to make even Darth Vader, Lord of the Sith, run. But what are your thoughts on this? And what are your thoughts on this being the only individual that Darth Vader ever ran from? And do you think that he was wise to do so? As always, my friends, stay tuned later today for another video, and may the Force be with you.